Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the beautiful Tatjana Bluchel. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I am doing very well. I am very excited to pick your brain a little bit. But before I do that, I would like to give the people that don't know you a little bit of a chance to get to know you. Growing up in Germany, you were a theater kid. You were always involved in some form of another in theater, whether it was on stage, behind the scenes, helping out with prop construction, sewing. You literally went all out to help out. And eventually you came to US and you received your BA in Albion, Michigan. What a beautiful, beautiful place. So what made you decide, coming from Germany, what settled you in Albion? What made you want to come here?
I was an exchange student in high school, in Reno, out of all places, and went back to Germany, finished high school, and then applied to a bunch of colleges. And Albion just seemed the right fit. It was a small liberal arts college. It had the majors that I was looking for. It had a good theater program. It was big enough to, get good professors, and had a good reputation, but it was also small enough that I knew that I would get something for my money,
Right.
I had classes that had like 6 people in it sometimes. So you had this great connection with your professors. I'm still friends with a lot of my professors, not even from my major anymore, but like my chemistry and my biology professors, my psychology. I was a psychology major as well. We're friends on Facebook. They're
Right.
reposting my crazy stuff that I'm sharing. Like it's just so cool to see that.
And
I
it's
don't
awesome
in
that you
like
can
a
have that type of connection with somebody, even if they weren't for your major.
Exactly. I mean, like, what other school did you see that where your chemistry professor that you had one class with will share what you do now, 15 years later? It's crazy. So it's a really great, it was a really great school.
And what I love about what you're saying right now is the fact that pride they took in you, that you left that type. Not only did they leave that impression on you, but you left that much of an impression on them. So that also speaks to your character as well as theirs. So that's super cool for me to hear a story like that.
Yeah, and in general in that school there was so much connection outside of just the classroom while when you're with your professors. There was events in the afternoon, in the evening, on weekends, obviously theater performances, and you connected with your professors on different levels. I mean, we hosted dinners with our college professor, college president and her husband. And they came and we cooked dinner and we played DDR with them and told dirty jokes, and it was great. I mean, where else would you get that, unless you go to a small college?
Right. And that's so awesome because, like I said, it's one of those things where you're always curious as to what kind of mark you're going to leave behind on these people. I feel like that's something that we're always worried about all the time, not just for us, like what are we getting out of our education, but what is that going to do for us in the long run as well? So to make that type of impression on, like you said, a chemistry teacher, like that's so impactful. And because right now obviously teachers are under a lot of fire, but for you to be able to tell amazing stories like this, it shows that people can make an impression on you even if they're not teaching you the one thing you're going to be doing with your life. You know what I mean? Like that's super, super amazing. And
Well,
it
funny enough,
shows how important
chemistry
teachers are.
chemistry is so important now in my job. I wasn't a chemistry major, but chemistry is so important in effects makeup now. So it
Right.
kind of did leave a little bit of an impression, I guess.
Touche. Touche. But I mean, you didn't finish in Albion though. You ended up getting your
No, I did.
MFA in film production in the New York. Oh, you did.
Yeah, I did my bachelor in Albion, so that's a 4-year college, and then I moved out to LA and then got my master's out here.
That's so awesome. Like, see, I didn't realize that. I thought that you transferred, but
No.
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was all 4 years in Albion. Got my bachelor in psychology and theater production, and then came out here to LA, and got my master's in fine arts in film production.
Okay. And okay, now I see that. Um now what made you decide to go to the West Coast rather than maybe like a New York or something out east? What drove you to the West Coast?
I well, like I said, I was an exchange student in Reno. So through my host family, one of my host dad's brother actually lived out in LA. And so I had the opportunity during my second summer to come out to LA and stay with him for a while and explore it. Growing up, I had all this theater experience, but there wasn't that much film around me. There was small town theaters, school theaters, all of that. So I knew theater. So I'm like, well, do I want to go to New York or to LA? Well, I have experienced theater. Let's experience movies and just do it for the summer. And if I don't like it, then I'll try to go to New York. And I liked it. I don't know, I connected with the city. I'm coming from a small town. I'm not a big city person anyway. So LA had, even though it is a major, major city, it doesn't have the New York feel to it. It doesn't have
Sure.
the claustrophobic skyscraper, you can't see the sky ever kind of feel to it. I live in a suburb now in Santa Clarita, and it's like a suburb. It's countryside. I mean, I walk like 10 minutes and I'm in the hills, and I can go hiking and I can go camping, and there's hills and there's mountains and there's snow-covered mountains right around the door, and there's the desert and there's the beach, and there's so much nature around me. That always helps me recharge. I think New York would have probably like depressed me or so. Like I just connected with LA and the very like kind of relaxed style of people out here. It's like you still get things done. You still do so much out here, but it's not that like super, super fast lifestyle that people have in New York. And I think that just connected with me way more.
Well, it's funny that you say you still get things done, because ever since you graduated, you've been acting, modeling, producing, sewing, managing wardrobe, assisting with casting. Like, yeah, you've done a thing or two since you've been out there and you've been done. So, now your most recent credits, obviously I have to talk about this. You did the makeup and the creature suit for The Mean One. What
Yes.
was it like to be a part of this film that I just read was like the #2 film in
Yes.
indie cinema right now? Like, it's just absolutely amazing. What was it like to be a part of this film?
It was an absolutely great opportunity. I mean, I've been working in makeup for about 8, 9 years now, and this was one of those like chances that just came along, and I have to really credit like Stephen Lamort and Amy Schumacher for that, because those two, I mean, just amazing. A great team, husband and wife, and that I'm grateful that they gave me the opportunity and the opportunity to create this character. I mean, I didn't create it from scratch because we all know what it's based on. But being able to take that and turn it into a horror version, a darker version, and have that freedom. And sometimes, funny enough, low budget can help you with that, because you have to be more creative. You
Yeah.
have to be like, well, how can I make this work? So, we had an existing Santa suit, an existing fuzzy green pants that they used in their little spoof trailer that they made before we made the big movie. And I was like, okay, let me grab this stuff from you guys and let me make it bigger. And the same with the prosthetics. We didn't have the budget to create prosthetics from scratch. We got prosthetics and we altered them. I altered them to make it look like the Grinch, and to make it look like, have that
Yeah.
resemblance, but not be the Grinch,
Sure.
because we aren't the Grinch.
Right.
We can't have the G word in our movie. So
Right.
it had to be, the sourcing is such a different process when you're not like, here's $1 million and do whatever you want with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. But sometimes these low budget movies make you really get creative and be like, how can I make this happen? And you have a limited time of shooting. You're not shooting like a $50 million movie where you shoot for 3 months. We shot this
Sure.
whole thing in 14 days. We had also a very, very limited amount of time that we shot with the fabulous David Howard Thornton. So, I mean, you have a limited budget and a limited time to do this. So you have to work it out. So
Right.
it's not like, can I spend 5 hours doing his makeup and putting every little hair on him, on his neck, on every piece? No. you grab a wig, you restyle it, and bam, we can switch this out fast. He
Right.
also had a stunt double for some of the really, really heavy stunts. Well, we have to be able to switch to costumes. Well, how do we switch to costumes without, doing a full change or having full duplicates? Because again, what do we do budget-wise?
Budget, yeah.
So, our two lovely actors, David and his stunt double, Robin, were in these like full body suits that were green. And we could switch really quick. The fat Santa belly, the Santa
Yeah.
suit, the green pants, the green fuzzy legs, and the hat. And they could switch really fast without, getting completely naked in front of everyone. So the creativity level is actually heightened sometimes with movies like this. And I really have to thank, like I said, Stephen and Amy for bringing me on and giving me that challenge and allowing me to run with it. And it was a great process. It was a really great process.
You did an amazing job. And for those of you that haven't seen our interview on The Mean One, you can check that out on our channel. And Tatjana can verify this. We had not had any interaction until after we recorded our review. So I didn't let my friendship influence the way that I felt about the film. And that's actually why I reached out to you, was because of how impressed Ashley and I were with a lot of the makeup and the design of The Mean One, Mr. Fitch, and a lot of the stuff that went around that. So, I mean, like, it's not like I did lip service towards you in the review because I knew you were coming on the show. I reached out to you after watching it and after filming our review because of how much it affected us and how much we really enjoyed it. That was one of the things that Ashley said was her favorite parts of the movie, was the makeup effects and how the Mean One looked in the film. So I think that's a real testament to you and to the fact that, like you said, you guys had a limited time, a limited budget. So obviously it's not a perfect movie. We've all said that. If you're going into this looking for a Hereditary A24 style movie, you're not going to be happy. If you go into this movie looking for a low budget slasher that you can throw on and just have a really fun time with, this is probably the movie for you. So make sure you are checking that out so you can check out some of her work. But not just
and
that.
credit also to Ashley Teal, who did all the beauty makeup and all the blood like wounds and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Whenever obviously I wasn't, working on either David or Robin in creating The Mean One, I tried to help her out and assisted her. And that's the other thing. It's like, again, on like these smaller projects, you get to be really like collaborative.
Sure.
So, she's doing makeup and applying a giant wound on someone and her hands are full. Well, hey, they need some blood thrown on somebody's face. Sure, I'll stand there with a cup of blood and some blood and some gloves and go, ooh.
Yeah.
So that scene when the sheriff is in the cave and we have our lovely lady that has our bows on her face, that moment, yeah, that's me standing there and going and throwing some blood on his face. But it's this great collaborative effort of like, oh, well, we want more, so hey, I'm gonna get the PA. So one of our PAs, Delaney, was like, I'll get my hands dirty, and reaches in and throws with me. So it's there's always a fuzzy line almost, because you're helping each other out. You're being like, okay, can I I'm actually in the very, very, very last scene of the movie. I'm a little bit of a background actor in it. Everybody was thrown into the last scene. It was fun.
Yeah.
So yes, so I have to do a big shout out to Ashley, who was the makeup artist for the beauty and for all of the wounds that you see throughout. And she's excellent, and we've worked together since we've met on that movie, and now we're friends, and now we're texting each other like, hey, are you available? Like, can you cover me on this job? So we've developed a great friendship throughout this, and because of this.
Well, Ashley, you're the shit. Just know that you are also appreciated. Thank you for all the hard work you do, because I know that it is not easy. So, Ashley, thank you as well. Now, I do also want to talk real quick before we get into why you're here. Valley Girls Effects. A lot of you can see the shirt right now. Can you tell us a little bit about Valley Girls Effects? Obviously, that's your company. What made you want to start that, and what's it all about?
Well, it is a makeup effects lab. The story behind it is basically I was with several other girls, graduated from makeup school, from different makeup schools, actually. And we were talking, and a lot of graduates from makeup schools are female, but
Sure.
not that many women work. Well, there's a decent amount of women that work in effects now, but there's not that many that work in labs, creating the prosthetics, creating, the specialty costumes, the power suits for Avengers and all of those kind of things, the cool props that you see, like all of the building stuff is a very, very male dominated field. Not saying that there aren't any women, there are, but
Right.
just still a very male dominated field. And there's that stigma of girls don't know how to use power tools, girls don't know how to, or girls can't carry heavy molds, because yes, they're heavy. They're really fucking heavy. But there's such a stigma still around that. And it was kind of upsetting to us. And we were like, no, like we need to, we're rocking this. We're
Right.
doing this. So we founded the company. I had the idea and brought the name to the table. And my two partners, Jessica Allen, who's also here in LA, and Mandolin Rain Greneau, she's on the East Coast. We were like, let's do this. We're our own company. And we're working out of our garages, but the biggest companies have started in their garages.
100%.
A&B Effects has started out in their garage. So, here we go. I mean, I built the mean one all in my garage. There's still green spray paint on the floor and green fuzzies that I will probably never get out of my garage ever. You think the glitter is the herpes of makeup, but faux fur is a close second there. But yeah, so that was our idea. And we embraced, the stereotype of the Valley girl that people have. And we're like, let's run with it. And our logo is our lovely
that's dope.
Rose the Riveter. But she's
That is
holding
awesome.
an airbrush and some makeup brushes.
Yeah.
So we ran kind of with the stereotype. We're like, let's go with the stereotype.
When, like you said, you talk about how you're just getting started, you're in your garage, but when you're passionate about what you do and you're good at what you do, you're only going to go up from here. And I think that's obviously showing with what you guys have been able to accomplish so far already.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, anytime. So before we get started, I do want to say all of Tatjana's social media links are also down in the description, guys. So you can follow her on social media. You can follow Valley Girls Effects, keep up with everything that they're up to, and you can stay up to date on all the hard work that they're doing. So that way, when they do bust into the corporate world, you're going to say, I knew them when they were working out of a garage, trying to get the herpes off the wall. So now, in order for you to work on The Mean One and work in horror in general, horror had to start for you somewhere. So now I would like to go back to the past and talk about the first thing that affected you with horror. And this could be a little bit tricky episode today, but your first horror movie was?
Well, one of my first 3 experiences with horror, I feel like always was Ghostbusters. The second one with Vigo. The lovely portrait of Vigo has haunted me. Oh my God. I don't know why that was so creepy, but I feel like the realism in it, I don't know, it still gives me creeps. Like I still as an adult watch that movie and like see him like staring down from that portrait and I'm like, like I can do all kinds of other stuff, but oh man, him looking down from that portrait. And it was that cliche, I don't know how old I was pretty young. But I'm like, I want to watch that movie. And I was like, yeah, but don't come running to me at 2 a.m. when you're having nightmares. And of course, at 2 a.m, I'm like, I have a nightmare.
I want to say real quick that I think that Ghostbusters 2 is absolutely a horror movie as well. Horror comedy, sure, but it's definitely a horror movie because you also have the scene where Janosch is coming in on the bike and the kid's out on the building and his eyes, start glowing and he reaches out and grabs the kid and puts him down on the bike and then flies off as Sigourney Weaver's trying to grab her kid on that balcony. That's a scene that really, really scared me as a kid too. And then you were talking about Vigo, obviously. The scene where they're all actually in the museum, the climax of the film, and they look at the painting and he's not there anymore. And then he materializes in the room and he's walking, and they had that delay effect on him where it looks like it's three of him walking at a time. And that's like, there's so many scenes in Ghostbusters 2. I could do a whole episode on that movie because that movie affected me that much too as a kid. Growing up, Ghostbusters 2 is my favorite of the bunch. Like, I
The
loved
slime, I
this
mean,
movie.
the slime, you're like, oh my God, I'm afraid to turn on the water in my sink. Like there might be slime coming out of it.
And I'm not gonna lie, I wanted the dancing toaster. Like, I'm just throwing that out there. I wanted the dancing toaster.
I think I want to say you can get one now. Like I want to say there's one like somewhere I saw one online where you can buy one that does that.
That's
But
amazing. And you got to play music for it, make it dance. That'd be so great. So we know that, Ghostbusters 2 is one of the things that really affected you at a young age, but that's not the only thing. There's also
no.
a couple other things that got to you as well.
Um, I think X-Files has been a big influence on my life. Just because it's such an epic show. I mean, just everything is in it. Horror and sci-fi and love, and so much of like all the genres are in that one show.
Yeah,
And the conspiracy theories, and oh my God, I'm absolutely obsessed with X-Files. But yes, one of the creepiest things that's still like, my husband and I had just rewatched like all of X-Files, and it still creeps me out. He's the guy that can extend like all of his limbs and then comes crawling through and crawls through like the shafts, and oh my God, no. Again, I feel like kind of similar to the slime. It makes you think like, crap, there could be something in my vent. Like
sure.
it's so surreal. And it was, again, another effect that was done so mind-blowingly well. I mean, in general, the X-Files had just amazing, amazing effects. All
Sure.
of their like creatures and deformed people and monsters were just mind-blowing. But that was one of those things where it's like, oh my God, that's too real.
Well, and also we talk about, the X-Files and how influential it is. Final Destination started off as an X-Files episode. They got picked up as a full film. Like, that's how important the X-Files is to horror in general. And it's funny because, these TV shows of like the X-Files, like that was really a gateway for some kids to get into horror that wasn't too scary. Like you had Are You Afraid of the Dark, Goosebumps, like those are all like those shows that like kind of gatewayed you into horror. Now, I've always been extremely transparent on everything that I do. The first actual horror movie that you watched, I've never seen. So I'm going to ask you questions about it, but I won't know the answers ahead of time. So, like I said, just to be transparent and to be fair, I don't lie. I just had to let that be known.
No,
But,
that's all
uh,
good.
and
Um,
Tatiana, the first horror movie you watched was?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's qualified as a horror movie. Again, it's one of those that like bends genres a little bit. It's like a little bit, I saw it classified as an adventure movie, which I think is wrong. Um, I've seen it classified as a thriller. I've seen it classified as horror. I've seen it classified as drama. So pick it. I don't care, like whatever it is to you. But for me, again, the realism made it to me horror. It's called well, it's an Italian film, so I don't even know the Italian title. Like, it has an Italian title. In German, it's called Ein Mädchen kämpft sich durch die grüne Hölle. Roughly translated as a girl fights her way through the green hell. And it's about a girl. I believe her parents were missionaries. See, I haven't even seen it because you can't get it anywhere. I'm like, I want it. Like, I think it's a crappy version of it is on YouTube maybe. But I want it so bad. I haven't shown it to my husband yet. I was like, I really need this movie somehow.
Yeah.
And so she goes to fly to be with them in the jungle, I believe, and the plane crashes. And one of those things that sticks in your head as a kid too with plane crashes, and I traveled a lot, was that her parents taught her always keep the seatbelt on. And when the seatbelt sign goes off, just loosen it a little bit, but still keep it buckled unless you have to get up and walk around. She's the only one that does that, so everybody else dies.
Right.
She ends up in the jungle somewhere by herself. And growing up, I guess, with her missionary parents, she was taught some part of survival So, she follows the river to find civilization and all of those things. But for me, the horror again comes in the realism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that happened a couple of times with injuries, obviously, where she's fighting her way through the Green Hill. And one of the really, really gross things, she eventually gets like, as you're trepping through the jungle and through muddy waters and wetness and whatnot, she gets in her wounds, eggs and larvae start coming.
Mm.
And so there's like scenes where she's sitting there and she's just like squeezes and it like comes out. And I'm like, oh
Oh,
my God. Like, so the fact that like, and that movie is old, it's from like the 70s.
right.
Again, amazing effects. That just are so mind-blowingly realistic that it grosses you out. And yeah, that was one of those movies that stuck with me, and I haven't even seen it that many times, but oh my God, it's just like something that sticks with you.
And what's so important about that is maybe, in the back of your mind, that's what made you want to do special effects someday, is
Yes.
remembering how this looked at that moment. And obviously, you were a younger lady. Do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen it?
I mean, I honestly don't really know 100%.
Mhm.
Turn some lights on. I mean, I must have been under 10.
Sure.
Definitely under 10. That because I remember when I first started traveling by plane a lot, that was one of those things that stuck with me, like keep your seatbelt.
Right.
So yeah, it must have been like probably between 5 and 10.
And especially if, with a female protagonist in the movie, you're rooting for her, and that's a peer to you, a
Yeah,
younger
and
female
younger,
protagonist.
and yeah, she wasn't, in her like 30s or 40s, where you're like, oh, her life experience has taught her all of this. Like,
Right.
no, she was a younger woman, like I want to say like maybe like a late teenager or so. And it is actually, fun fact, based on real events.
Oh,
It is
that's
based
even
on real events. And I want to say that I just recently heard the rumor that there is maybe an American production, American or British, English speaking production that is in the works that has that topic. So we'll see if it comes out, and we'll see if it lives up to that movie. Like I said, for it being from the 70s, it still affects me today. It's like
right.
40 years later, it's a movie that is still like makes me think.
Hmm. Well, and I was actually going to ask you later on, but we'll jump into that right now. A question that I like to ask is, would you like to see the first horror movie that you watched remade today? So you talked about there's a rumor that it is in production. Is that something that you would be excited to go and see?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't think it will ever get the same feeling that it gave me as a kid. Like that's just not gonna, like that first feeling is not gonna happen again. But I want to see where they go with it. I mean, it's like something that is based on real events. So anything that's based on real events can be interpreted differently, can be, taken, you can be like, oh, this is super true to the story, or this one is just inspired by it. There's so
Right.
many ranges of like true event, movies. Um, so I'm curious where they
Mhm.
go with it. I'm always curious. I mean, I'm not up for somebody making a movie that was, only made 10 years ago, but this has been made in the 70s, so I'm open to seeing a new version of it.
Keep it practical. Please
Yes.
keep
Oh
it
my God.
practical. Maybe if they need makeup, they can hire you. How amazing would that be to work on the remake of your first horror movie? That'd be fucking amazing.
Yeah, that would be.
Um, so we talked about like us, you talked a little bit about like the worm scenes and the airplane scene. Do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most?
Um, I want to say the worms. The worms, it's one of those things where you're like, well, crap, like I gotta like make sure that if I have a cut, that I clean it really well. And like you're at home and you're in like a safe environment, but you're still thinking about that. And you're like, well, she was in the jungle and she was in there for like, I don't know how long.
Right.
I can't remember the exact time span that she was in the jungle, but obviously it's not realistic that you're going to get like worms when you're like at home and you get a scratch from your cat and there's not maggots coming out next week. No,
Oh,
but it's one of those things that just kind of in your head, you're like, okay, I got to disinfect this.
yeah. Yeah. And it may, especially if it's been able to stick with you for this long, that plays to how important and powerful that scene is. Because even you just explaining it to me gave me the chills. Like, no thanks. I'm good. Um,
And then, years later looking back, you're like, wow, how did they do that? That's then the next like thing where it's like it was so realistic to me and it affected me so deeply, like, wow, I want to do stuff like that. I want to do stuff
right.
that can affect other people like that, whether it's in horror or in positive ways, whatever it
Yeah.
is. Just having like a tiny, tiny, tiny little moment that was probably, I don't even remember how long that scene was. Maybe it was just 5 seconds. But the fact that it stuck with me that long, I think that's cool. I think, if somebody takes something out of The Mean One and is like, ooh, that moment was really cool. Just one moment.
Right.
If you love the movie, hate the movie, somewhere in between the movie, but if there's one scene where you're like, ooh, that was cool, and that will stick with you, that's all we can ask for.
Right.
That's amazing.
And I think that this, see, I can't get too much into it because I don't want to spoil anything. But there is a moment with one of those long sticks that you put receipts on in a diner.
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was
Um,
amazing.
it's like say you were part of that, and I think that's something I'll think about every time I go to a restaurant and see one of those things. So, we know about your first horror movie, but now my little buddy Ghostface is here, Tatjana, and he has a question for you. What's your
Okay.
favorite scary movie, Tatjana? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh man, I don't know. There's just so many good ones out there. I mean, we rewatch Halloween every Halloween, like the OG Halloween. That's just something that will never go away. I don't know. There's so many that affect me in different ways.
Hmm.
Um, I truly 100% believe in ghosts. So the first Paranormal Activity scared the shit out of me. I'm like, wow, that was something else. Um, I mean, there's so many movies that have such great, like even just elements, even if it's not the whole movie that is like blowing you away. Uma recently, like, wow, that was a really cool movie and like
Yeah.
completely different than I had expected, but then also something how I expected it. But they were still able to draw me in. And when it comes to older stuff, I sometimes I like the campy stuff, and I'm a big fan of Lovecraft. My husband and I are big Lovecraft fans. So, Reanimator, from Beyond. From Beyond
Hmm.
was like, oh my God. And so on a personal note, I cosplay the three Gotham Sirens, Poison Ivy, Catwoman, and Harley.
Yeah.
I really think, I mean, I know Bruce Timm said Harley is based on this TV character, but I swear the story from Beyond, that's Harley. I mean, she's a psychiatrist. Then there's a guy that is in the hospital that she gets out. She goes crazy, goes from this pretty, like, glasses, blonde, braided hair to this dominatrix chick all of a sudden. And then she ends up in the psych ward. And you're like, there's no way that he didn't see this and taken like a little grain of inspiration from that. I mean,
Sure.
so cool to see that how a horror movie like this can lead somewhere completely different. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just my theory that he saw that, and I don't know, but it really struck me, and it's such a cool, fun horror movie again with great practical effects. So
And
there's
I'm
no
a
real
huge fan
one
of the.
answer. There's no real
No,
one answer.
that's why I don't ever tell anybody I'm going to ask this question because I don't want you to think about it. I want that off the seat of your pants answer. Um, and now that you say that, that totally makes sense. By the way, so I did have an amazing time talking to you about what you've done your first horror movie, your favorite horror movie. But before I let you go, I have one last question for you. We're going to bounce back to your first horror movie, and I'll never be able to say that name, guys. So I'm not even going to try because I will embarrass people of German descent all the way to the end of the world. But what we're going to do is we're going to rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. What we're doing is strictly ranking this movie on how much it affected you on first viewing. So, 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Tatjana, what would your ranking of your first horror movie be?
I would probably put it at a 4.
Mm-hmm. I'll say for it to stick with you this long, I would think that it would have to be it's something very impactful on your life.
Yeah.
So I think a 4 is an extremely fair rating.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's an older movie. It's not necessarily my favorite movie of all times. And it, now watching it, it probably has flaws, but as a kid watching it, and like you said, the first viewing, how much it affected me and how much it stuck with me, I think, yeah, I think it's pretty high on the scale, even if it's not like a straight up horror movie. It's not,
Right.
crazy zombies and aliens chasing her through the jungle, but next.
To me, horror is what you make it 100%. Like, horror is the hardest genre to lock down because you can't say it has to have death. The Lion King and Bambi have death. You can't say it has to scare me. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the Large Marge scene, that scared me more than probably 90% of horror movies I watched. I wouldn't consider that a horror movie. So, like, horror itself is a hard genre to lock down. So if it affected you to the point to where it scared you, it made you think, it stuck with you, how the hell isn't that a horror movie to you? So to me, horror is absolutely what you make it. So I did say this at the beginning, guys, but we're at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before it does, there are some social media links in the description that need your guys' loving. So make sure you're clicking on these social media links. Make sure you're giving her a follow so you can stay up to date on everything she has coming up in the future. Tatjana, please don't go anywhere. I have a couple more questions for you.
Sounds
Uh,
good.
Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.